let's take a look at some of the core design steps or principles of how you go about creating a chaotic system. And the way he did that was to ensure that the high-level design of the organization was really embedded in the system and that people were really familiar with it. So this relates to what we were talking about earlier around vision, mission, and values. And that if you can have people really connected to that, then in a way, they will do what needs to be done to serve that mission and that vision with the various capabilities that they have. So in his language, he started with purpose, or actually before that even, need. So like in the previous session, we were looking at what's the real need in the world. And then if you've got that need, then you can begin to crystallize your purpose. And the question he would ask around the purpose is, who is it that we want to become as an organization? Given that we're trying to meet that need in the world, who do we need to become? Not yet what do we need to do, but who do we as a community, as an organization, need to become in order to be able to serve that need? And once that had crystallized, he would then look at, okay, for us to become that, what are some of the guiding principles that we need to have in place to help us move in that general direction? And these are principles that guide our behavior. So principles that we can kind of really check with each other on. For example, a principle around honesty and transparency. So we'll be honest and transparent with each other. That's a principle which would help you become a certain kind of organization. And it's a principle which you can check in with each other every so often. Hey, how are we doing with this principle? Are we being honest and transparent with each other? And if we're not, is it because we need some help in becoming that, in being better at doing that principle? Or is it because the principle's not so relevant anymore? So you keep the principles alive through conversation and by checking in every so often and your performance. How well are you doing? How well are we doing with these principles? We don't want to lock them in stone and have them on a metal plaque on the wall, because they need to be alive in the organization. They need to be a subject of conversation and awareness. You do want to keep them in people's awareness, so having a way that does that is useful, but you don't want to lock them in, because we want to be evolving them as the organization continues to develop. So once you've got the purpose and principles, he saw that really as the key high-level design, who we want to become and what those key guiding principles are for our own behavior in the organization. And so when he would recruit somebody into Visa, that was what they'd really focus on, their resonance with the purpose and principles. Did they really get it? And then the story goes that when people were looking for a job within the system, he felt if they had a good set of qualities and competencies and were resonant with the purpose and principles, he'd send them into the organization to take a look around and spend some time exploring the system and then see if they could find the place in the organization where they would most naturally fit and be able to contribute their passion and their talents to the higher purpose of the organization. So that fits what we were talking about in the previous session, really around natural design, helping people slot into the habitats in the organization where they can most contribute most naturally to a core function of the system. So next level of design is looking at people, which we were just talking about. So you've got purpose and principles, then who are the right people who will be attracted to that purpose and principles to come into the organization, and how do we help them find their place? After that, begin to get a shared sense of concept. So that's, what is it that we're really talking about here? What is the feel of the organization? How can we begin to conceptualize our sense of the organization? Begin to give it a bit more description. Well, I imagine being in this organization and see us walking around and these kind of things are happening. So begin to give it a bit more detail, crystallize it out a little bit more in the conceptual form. And then there's a very interesting step, which is named here as the beliefs that limit us. So once we've got this concept, of how we think it could be, we can then check in on any beliefs that we might have that we feel are going to prevent us becoming that. So go into a process around as we look at this purpose, the principles, the concept, what are some of the things that you feel might be in the way of us becoming that? And explore whether those are beliefs that are true, that hold information that are going to be useful, or are they beliefs that we've just brought with us from past experience that we could actually transform, that would enable us to move forward? So what's in the way of us progressing towards that purpose? A little bit of self-reflection brought into the practice. And only then do we start to ask the question about structure. So we've done a high-level design, purpose, principles, people and concept, looked at some of the beliefs. And only then do we ask ourselves, what's the structure that needs to be in place to support that concept of our organization, to help us live those principles and become that purpose that we identified early on? So structure's the last thing we do. And often the mistake that we make as we design an organization is we create our organizational structure from an existing template, from the way it's always been done. Whereas in this concept, the structure is the last thing. It's what's going to serve us to live our values and our mission within the organizational context. And so once we got the structure in place, then we really move into the practice of delivering the product or the service to meet the need in the world, and then we're back full circle again. So we can use this in many different ways. We can use it if we're starting a new organization to really go about the design of the organization. We can use it if we're in an existing organization to check on how aligned are these different elements. Do we have a set of principles? Are they clear? Are there things that seem to be working that don't seem to be working? If the structure doesn't seem to be working, why is that? What is it not aligned with earlier on? Is it not aligned with our concept? So there are different interventions that we can make as we look through these lenses on organizational development. So this chaotic approach is really a very useful way of conceptualizing an organization that's particularly relevant to the times that we're in. Because if you have a too structured, static, and rigid organization, it's not going to be able to navigate dynamically through very challenging and complex times. So Dee Hock's experience with Visa initially, the insights of how to create a more chaotic organization with a healthy balance of chaos, self-organization, and order and structure can be very useful for us as we look at our governance systems and structures of our organizations today. So that's the end of this module. And what we'll be doing in the next module is getting into more concrete detail about some examples of real governance systems that work on these chaotic principles that actually help us to put them into practice in very concrete ways. So you can go and implement some of these ideas now in the integration tasks. Go back to some of the material if you need to learn a little bit more or can't work out the answer to some of the questions. Explore some of the concepts with your students in the discussion forums. And don't forget the personal development modules. Important to keep working on ourselves so that we are well equipped to work with these concepts.